from the past with Sami when it comes to conspiracies of being held down and all this other stuff. What you really just need is that motivation that he wants to be the champion for the first time. And so, if you tie all this together, what is WWE actually teasing with this thing? Well, again, there's a couple of directions you can go. Remember, we talked about a couple weeks ago where you had Braun Breaker kind of going at Sami Zayn, right? The crowd's chanting one more time. They're wanting to just see Braun Breaker destroy Sami Zayn. So, like the ultimate underdog of Sami Zayn, when you talk about the way the crowd reacts, they reacted much better this week after he come out to make the save. Although they were chanting for CM Punk, they wanted Punk to join Sami Zayn and all that. So could you have a little bit of that bitterness once again for the reaction from the fans for Sami Zayn at some point if they're going to pull, this heel turn with Sami? Could you kind of have that into play where it was kind of the same thing with John Cena to a certain extent, right? The crowd eventually just turns on you. You use that as your motivation, and now I'm going to stick it to him, basically. I'm going to go win my world championship, and I'm going to do it at the expense of Jay. Well, that's one way to do it.
Shut off your AC and open whiteout survival and just put it right on your thermostat.
Right? But I think you kind of had some of those similar things that we've seen before on this particular show when it comes to that one backstage segment between Sami and Jey Uso, which has kind of been a theme where I feel like they've interacted in some way, right? Every week, I would say for the most part, since WrestleMania 41. And so you had the one where Sami comes to the back and you've got him, they hug it out and all this other stuff. Sami's kind of, telling Jay, I've got your back, and all this other stuff. And he did. He came out to help him. But, they did kind of that somewhat of a similar visual. It wasn't the same. If you remember back last summer, we talked about that thing they did on SmackDown where it was Cody Rhodes sitting there and Randy Orton also sitting with him, right? And between them, you had the championship just kind of sitting there, Cody sitting on one side, Orton sitting on the other, and the championship just sitting right between these two. They didn't go that far with Sami and Jay on this particular show, but you did have a couple of those times where you could see Sami's eyes sort of glance down, right? And then afterwards, when you see Sami leaves, they've hugged it out, Sami leaves, Jay goes to sit down, and what is he sitting beside? He's sitting beside the championship. So, where were those eyes glancing toward for Sami Zayn there, right? Clearly, just a couple of those little tiny things, and we know those matter in the Triple H era. Now, we could also say, well, the Cody and Orton thing really never led anywhere. But maybe that's the point, right? Where you're just kind of adding in that potential tension. And that's where you want to get to with a lot of this stuff. Because, again, we could go back to the long stare and the camera zooming out as Sami Zayn's watching Jey Uso celebrate with the championship on, with the fans. That's something where you can see that there's something going on with Sami Zayn, right? There's something in his mind that almost feels somewhat conflicted. He wants that championship, but maybe he knows that to get it, he's got to go through the person that really these two have built a connection unlike any other in WWE. When you really think about, just the interpersonal relationships that we've had between WWE superstars on screen over the years. I mean, this is one of the more memorable ones that we've seen in the last little bit, given kind of the evolution of the Bloodline story, right? So I think having that to where now you're setting up the possibility where it's a tag team match on Saturday. You've got CM Punk and Sami Zayn teaming up to take on Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker. And a lot of people are asking the question, is Sami Zayn the third man, right? Is he going to turn? We know he didn't turn whenever Seth Rollins presented him with the opportunity to go to SmackDown, walk away. Sami couldn't do that. He's the ultimate underdog, right? He's got to fight back. And so he fought back, and he's continued to fight back against Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker because these two, as they've proven, do not really care who are in their way. They're going to do whatever it takes, and we kind of saw that hammered home even more on this Raw. The end goal here, the long-term game, is for Seth Rollins to get that World Heavyweight Championship back that is currently held by Jey Uso. But it's also just to continue to gain the power, right? And so, when you tie in, is WWE teasing the possibility that Sami is going to turn on CM Punk on Saturday? And this is the big turn. I've seen some people ask this question. Is this when it's going to happen? Well, if that is going to happen, I feel like it sort of defeats the purpose, right? You could maybe tie it in to say, all right, Sami just all of a sudden out of nowhere becomes the third man. He turns on Punk, and that's kind of a story you can tell as he joins Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker. I just don't think the timing necessarily is right because if you really think about it, this whole long game is about Sami and Jay, and it's really more about Sami and the World Championship. That is the long game. It's can he win the championship for the first time? And there are a couple opportunities he has to do it, right? Could Sami somehow be involved in the Money in the Bank match coming up on June 7th in Los Angeles? Could he be part of that match? And if he wins it, I've sort of pushed that idea before, then obviously you set up a lot more sort of a fascinating dynamic in play if Sami Zayn is walking around with the Money in the Bank briefcase, because then as Jay is eyeing this title, knowing he has all these different challengers, as we said, whether it's Rollins, whether it's Breakker, Gunther, Paul, whoever, he also knows that his friend, the best connection maybe he's ever built outside of his brother, he knows he's lurking with that Money in the Bank briefcase. So that's obviously something every single week you could play up until eventually, somehow, it plays out, whether it is Sami potentially cashing in on Jay, making that conflicted choice where he's got a decision to make and he just has to do it. He needs that title. Or maybe he tries to do it with the WWE champion, whether that's John Cena or someone else, right? So that's something you could do. But remember, too, the Royal Rumble is always a possibility. The Royal Rumble in 2026 is going to take place in Saudi Arabia. And so could Sami be one of the front runners to win the Royal Rumble, go on to main event WrestleMania 42 and challenge for the championship there, whether it's against Jay, whether against someone else, right? We'll see. So I think, again, those are different options you have. But I think the biggest question to ask beyond is WWE teasing this big Sami Zayn heel turn that we discussed, several weeks ago now. And when you see the way they're kind of setting it up, people are going to continue to ask the question, what happens if Sami Zayn gets pinned in the tag team match on Saturday at Saturday night's main event? Then how does Sami react, right? What is his reaction then if he's the person who takes the pin and somehow, whether it's miscommunication with CM Punk, something happens, right, to where he is the person who simply gets pinned? And we're going to have our Saturday night's main event predictions coming up on Wednesday. And I will give you my full thoughts on what I think is going to happen in that match. But for now, just think about that. What happens if Sami Zayn gets pinned? Jey Uso likely to retain, we would think, the championship against Logan Paul. He still has the world title. Sami gets pinned maybe, moves one step further away from what he really wants, and that is the world championship. Sure, he is also motivated by his friend and protecting his friend Jey Uso. But he's also motivated by getting that championship. And remember, the one man who has gone around with Sami Zayn there for a little bit, like the devil on his shoulder, carrying cross, said a lot of things that Sami Zayn had to think about. Seth Rollins said a lot of things that Sami Zayn had to think about. Eventually, do those things sort of take front and center in Sami Zayn's mind as he chases that first ever World Heavyweight title? That's where we're at right now with Sami Zayn. And if we're looking at all the different things they're adding up, yes, it does seem like at some point you have to do something with Sami and Jay, as we talked about several weeks ago. When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen the same way we thought it would? Or is it simply going to be Sami Zayn, the ultimate underdog, stays as Sami Zayn, the ultimate underdog, even though you've had some crowds chant for him to get speared one more time? You've had some crowds sort of, again, kind of like what Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker are doing. A lot of questions still to be asked, but I think we learn a lot more about Sami's direction on Saturday at Saturday night's main event. Will he turn? I don't think so, because I think the bigger story is about Sami and Jey Uso in some way, shape, or form here over the next maybe 6 months or so in WWE. But you guys let me know what you think. What are they cooking up with Sami Zayn? How